So look, I'd now like to welcome three commentators before we travel to another place, Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane. But let's just reflect a little bit on the Christie. Welcome to Professor Phyllis Butow from the School of Psychology at the University of Sydney, and Phyllis is a renowned researcher into the experience of cancer care. Welcome also from Wood Bagot, one of the team working on the internal design and other aspects of the new Australian Centre for Proton Therapy and Research, Rosina Di Maria, who's a principal with Wood Bagot, and Associate Professor Peter Gorayski, a radiation oncologist from the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Welcome to all of you. This is the clapping way that you applaud each other. Rosina, let me come to you first. Two or three things that you found thought-provoking, useful in the Christie experience.
Yeah, I think that was wonderful, and it's certainly ingrained and aligned with our thinking that instead of designing a space for patients, our role is to design a space for people. And all people need the same things. We need to feel comfortable, we need to feel safe, and we need to feel welcome. And so our role is to really understand what that means through the eyes and lens of a child, an adolescent and an adult, and craft spaces that help people respond in a physical and mental way. So that was really important. And I think it was just so special to learn about the small human touches which help build that confidence with patients and care, and actually put the emphasis on the happy, which was a really nice thing as well.
Can I say, you were with us last week when the people at Peter McCallum talked about Ilana Berger, the social worker and working with the adolescents and the young adults. She talked about seeing the design of internal spaces through a developmental lens. And I think that was very much, again, what was coming from John Archer there at the Christie. Could you give us a couple of examples of what you've seen or that you're thinking of yourself that take into account this notion of the different levels of maturity of younger patients?
I think it's a really good point. But it also starts with an overarching theme of creating a total space environment that really has quality at its core and crafts every human need response. So for us, biophilia is something that we're really interested in, which is the use of nature in environments, because all people respond well to nature. And so there has to be a single sort of brand that overlays all the spaces and ties all the spaces together. But then I think it's the focus in those different developmental stages that take you to the next layer and level of exploration in a space and how a small child would respond. And I think it helps, from our point of view as well, we analyse profiles of different people. So it's really important for us to see that world through those lenses. So from a small child and having waiting spaces that allow mothers to nurse or to keep an eye on other small children if they're coming with other family members or siblings, right through to how the adolescent actually feels that they need more privacy, that their emotions might, it is a different experience from their point of view. They might have to have travelled different distances. So creating spaces that they can retreat to but still feel connected is something we're very interested in.
Now, I'll just ask you one more thing, if I may, and it's just a personal comment because I'm into practical specifics. Sure. And one thing I've noticed so far is that all the front reception desks are very high. And I was originally a primary school teacher, trained as a primary school teacher, and I was attracted to the small furniture. And I also know that many people who have cancer and who are in treatment spend a little bit of time in wheelchairs. So both children and people in wheelchairs are low. And so even in the wonderful centres we've seen, if a child or a person in a wheelchair comes to reception, and I notice how John Archer really emphasised that importance of the welcome, which as a patient I couldn't agree with more, but I've never seen a reception desk that isn't high. And I wonder if we need a desk that has a little low bit so that if you're arriving with a little person, you could sit and talk to them eye to eye.
It's interesting you say that, Julie. Well, you can join our design team anytime. But in fact, we have responded exactly with that. So let's talk about demographics also. So a very elderly person, it needs to be recognisable instantly. So they need to feel they can get there without sort of the pathway being interrupted. So they need to see it. But we have definitely designed the desk to have both of those elements, because openness and lowering not only helps the practical sense, it's the mental approach of actually I can cross that barrier by asking questions. I feel like I'm actually, there's not a separation between us. So we've designed both.
Excellent. And I'll just mention too, because I'm 66 and arthritic myself, that when you're unwell, it's quite nice to sit down at reception sometimes if you have to wait for a little while, and you often don't see chairs there. So I'm just being nitty-gritty because I remember this so vividly. But
it is the detail that counts, though.
But we'll meet you again at the end of our conversation. But Professor Phyllis Butow, if I could come to you, our cancer researcher from University of Sydney. Phyllis, 2 or 3 comments that struck you as really interesting, thought-provoking, valuable.
Well, I think one of the things that really impressed me was that they had created a position like John's and several positions underneath him which really focus on improving the patient experience. Because I know from my own experience of trying to develop better services for anxiety and depression that unless a service is adequately resourced with staff and time, the existing staff, with the best intents, really struggle to take on the extra work over and above their duties. So simply having those positions in place is really impressive. And I think they really understand that it's the human relationships and interactions which make people feel at home and comfortable. So having those support staff smiling at you as you enter reception each day for your radiotherapy or proton therapy, having staff come to the Friday coffee sessions to really meet patients as human beings rather than just staff. Those things, I think, would make an enormous difference to the experience of people in a centre like this.
Could I ask you too about the role of Charlotte Cooper, who fortuitously came in with a proton panda at the end? These health child therapists. My understanding in the United Kingdom is they're fundamental to the team when it's a children's cancer service, whereas I don't think we routinely have them. We have them sometimes, but mainly they rotate and people just get brief opportunities for training. So your thoughts there on that role in the cancer team?
I think in a centre which is providing services to children, that play therapists are essential, and I think she made that point in saying that that's the natural way that children communicate and engage with their surroundings. So I know that in some of the large children's centres for cancer, they do have play therapists as an integral part of the staffing, but certainly in other services, particularly for those that cover adults and children, a play therapist may not be so central to the staffing. So I think that is really critical. And as she said, it helps them to assess where the child is at and what they might be needing to better be able to provide services that meet those needs.
Look, thank you very much, Phyllis. And if you're watching this now, whether live at the moment or through YouTube, and you have views on anything that we're discussing, but particularly on this question of the role of play therapy for children, because for the new Proton Therapy Centre, the Australian Bragg Centre for Proton Therapy and Research being built at the moment in Adelaide, children are a key recipients of proton therapy. This role of caring for children is very important, and we're going to work out a way to allow you to send us information via YouTube, because many more people will watch this on YouTube than in the live webinar that we're doing right now. But let me come to Associate Professor Peter Gorayski, a radiation oncologist at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. I've got a question for you, Peter, but before that, the 2 or 3 things that really stood out for you in what you saw at the Christie.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Hi, everybody. Look, before I answer that, I just want to point out something, and that is a big thank you to you, Julie, for your tireless efforts as a cancer advocate. So really, I'd like to highlight that before anything. So there are 2 or 3 things that I think were really exciting to hear. Was this concept of using light and colour. And, I'm a radiation oncologist, not an architect or an interior designer, but clearly there must be a science basis behind all that. And there's a psychology that must be known and studied about the effects of environment on patients and well-being. So I'm very excited to hear about that. I was actually lucky enough on 2 occasions to visit the Christie, so I've seen this firsthand. It is a light-filled, warm place that indeed does look like a hotel, not like a typical hospital. The other thing I'd like to say is I was very interested in this concept of separating young children from TYA, or in Australia we call them AYA, so the teenage to young adult population. Their needs are actually very different. And so the younger children that required general anaesthetic for their therapy have this wonderful animal theme that they embark on with Proton, Panda and other characters. I thought that was very clever. And then with the AYA group, of course, they have very different needs. And I really liked how John made the comment that the facility needed to respond to their different levels of maturity, and how that cannot be as obvious as it may seem. Like he mentioned when he said a 12-year-old may be as mature as a 21-year-old, but also the reverse can be true.
I'll just say, Peter, I'd also like to emphasise the use of that model proton therapy machine. It's a scale model using the same materials, an exact model of what the child or indeed adult will lay on to get their treatment. And it was made by an engineer within the Christie team. A similar scale model is used for radiation therapy at the St James University Hospital in Leeds. I am so keen about models, I travelled to Leeds just to see it, and it will be on our YouTube channel for you to have a look at as well. And most radiation therapy, and it'll be the same for proton therapy people, don't get to see the room they're going to be treated in before the first session. And I think it's so unusual. Unless you see it, you don't understand. So I'm a great advocate of models, not only for paediatric patients, but for adults. So I just put that in. It's a personal passion. But Peter, just before we travel to Brisbane, I think it's so important that we emphasise that while we are looking at proton therapy centres internationally, because the Australian Bragg Centre for Proton Therapy and Research is currently being designed and built, and our architects are with us, it is important to make clear that for many, many cancer patients for many years to come, what is called conventional radiation therapy will be the best treatment for many patients. And indeed, it's modern, sophisticated, highly targeted radiation therapy is a very, very effective treatment. I myself had it, and here I am after a stage 4 throat cancer. Is that an important point to get across in these webinars?
I think that's absolutely critical to get right in these webinars. Make no mistake, modern radiotherapy, which is, we're using the term conventional treatment, is quite literally a marvel of modern physics and technology advancements. Radiotherapy these days, which is readily accessible around Australia, is very, very targeted. And we in Australia are actually some of the world's leading technologists when it comes to highly conformal targeted radiotherapy. So no patient or their loved ones watching this should forget that their healthcare providers have access today everywhere in Australia to highly sophisticated targeted conventional treatment. Proton beam therapy is merely a different way to deliver radiation. Dose is dose, as we say, and it's only select patients that will benefit from the unique physical advantages of particles over conventional X-ray therapy. You can access proton beam therapy as an Australian before our centre comes online in about 3.5 years through something called the Medical Treatment Overseas program. But your healthcare providers will know about that. And so any patient having question marks about treatment that they've had in the past, or indeed treatment that they may be embarking on, needs to remember that the vast majority of patients will be well treated by conventional radiotherapy.
Thank you so much, Associate Professor Peter Gorayski, Rosina Di Maria from Wood Bagot, and also Professor Phyllis Butow.